Hello, and welcome to the Nature Disturbed podcast, a podcast where we look at the good, the offensive, and the confusing parts of the animal kingdom. This podcast was recorded on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. This episode contains strong language and adult themes. Well, babies, I'm putting my journalist hat on today. I'm sat in the sink, holding a sound recorder in one hand and a pen in the other. I don't have a pad to write with, though. That's okay. I can just use my body. Let's just see if this thing works. Here. P-I-G. Pig. Right there on my forehead. Great. I'll start today by reading some headlines. Awe-inspiring and harrowing. How two orcas with a taste for liver decimated the great white shark capital of the world. The Guardian, January 23rd, 2025. Orcas are hunting great white sharks and throwing the ecosystem into chaos. Vice, April 1st, 2025, and it was not intended as an April Fool's joke. Killer whales murder great white sharks for their livers. Popular Science, February 3rd, 2025. I'm so intrigued by the use of the word murder there. I always thought murder was defined as the crime of unlawfully and unjustifiably killing a person, and that it's not something committed between wild, non-human animals. But what does Merriam-Webster know? Anywho, it seems clear to me that this is a closed case. The cruel, murderous orcas have been single-handedly decimating the population of great white sharks in coastal South Africa, an ecosystem which lives in a vacuum. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Thanks, as ever, to my friend Damon McMillan for the fantastic music. I'll end with a short poem to help summarise today's topic. These villainous whales are vile and nefarious. It was orcas who've left shark populations precarious. Catch you next time. Hang on one moment. It might be because I'm sat on a particularly large pair of tongs, but something doesn't feel right here. There's a tingling in my stomach. I'm feeling excitable and my eyes are rolling into the back of my head. Okay, it's definitely the tongs. But seeing as part of the Nature Disturbed mission statement involves serious scientific sleuthing, I might as well dig a little deeper. In the words of Fred Jones, well gang, it looks like we've got a mystery on our hands. God, he's sexy, isn't he? Fred from Scooby-Doo. Is it socially acceptable to say you think a cartoon character is hot? Perhaps not. It's definitely not socially acceptable to say that I chew on his nipples, and so I'm not going to say that. Today's quote, could it be anything else, is a quote from Jaws. You're gonna need a bigger boat. No, not that quote. This one. There's nothing in the sea this fish would fear. Other fish run from bigger things. That's their instinct. But this fish doesn't run from anything. He doesn't fear. Now, Jaws is a great movie. My favourite part is when the guy in the kayak gets it. That'll teach you for trying to save children. But it's not 100% scientifically accurate on all counts. And it turns out there is something in the sea that a great white shark does fear. No, it's not me in a bikini. Rude. The shark should be so lucky. The orca is a truly formidable creature. That will be no news to anybody. And the great white shark has every right to fear it. The question today isn't, are orcas killing great whites in South Africa? They are. They are doing so habitually and in creatively violent ways. Today's question is, are orcas responsible for South Africa's declining great white shark populations? And to answer that question, I thought I would head to the scene of the crime itself, not only to meet today's interviewee, but also to see if I could find a great white shark and ask it some questions. Bloody seagulls.
Wah, wah, wah.
Shut up! Oh, hi guys. Sorry, you caught me off guard there. That's not how I talk to seagulls. I respect them. I love animals and nature. I'm here in the coastal waters of Mossel Bay, about 400 kilometres east of Cape Town, along the Garden Route. The marine environment here is a dynamic, productive, and dangerous place. Here at the southernmost tip of the continent, the Benguela Current pushes north from the South Atlantic, bringing cold, nutrient-rich water from great depths to the western coastline. And from the east, warm tropical waters flow from the Indian Ocean. They meet to create an ecosystem of staggering beauty. That's exactly where I am now, on a paddleboard. I figured that the silhouette of a human on a paddleboard is notoriously tempting to a great white shark, so it would increase my chances of seeing one. I've also used face paint to draw on some cute seal whiskers and a nose, but that's for me. Now, I am a bit skinnier than a seal, even though I am such a chocoholic, so I also brought a bucket of chum with me. Don't ask me how I sourced it, you don't want to know. My plan is to release this chum into the ocean bit by bit, very slowly, over the course of perhaps an hour or so, being very careful not to throw it in all at whoa! For fuck's sake. Fucking hell. Okay, well I dropped the chum. If that doesn't attract a great white shark, then I don't know what will. That's okay, I think it should do the trick. Sharks have an excellent sense of smell, so hopefully all the blood I'm currently floating in will attract one. A great white can detect a single drop of blood floating in 10 billion drops of water. They have good eyesight and they're smart. They also have electroreceptors called the ampullae of Lorenzini. These comprise pores around the snout and head which are able to sense an electrical field. They build maps of the Earth's magnetic fields which helps them navigate the open ocean. Sharks are highly skilled, finely tuned creatures which predate the dinosaurs. And if today was 2015, back when great white sightings were common, I would be a lot more confident about seeing one. Oh, I do hope I see a great white shark today. If I do, I'm going to ask it all sorts of hard-hitting scientific questions, like, how were you treated on the set of Jaws? What does Steven Spielberg smell like? And would you rather die in a house fire or from drowning? Alas, we're in 2025, and there's not a shark to be seen. If I don't see one, I at least hope I run into South African Queen Tyler. It is possible. We know she likes water. How does her song go?
Get me a water, get me a water.
I'm sweaty. I want a bottle of water. Or something along those lines. I'm not good at remembering lyrics. Anyway, that's enough incoherent babbling for one moment. Back to sharks. Historically, South Africa has been the great white capital of the world. In these waters originated the iconic imagery of seals being catapulted out of the water, stunned by surprise attack from below, from a 5-metre-long black-pupil machine, which itself is launching its own nearly 2-ton body out of the water. Great whites are, as we know, not the only predators in these waters. The orca, or the killer whale, is the largest living member of the dolphin family. They are described as a cosmopolitan species, meaning they appear across most of the Earth's surface. When Carrie Bradshaw asked for a cheeseburger, please, large fries, and a cosmopolitan, in Season 2, Episode 11 of Sex and the City, she wasn't asking for a killer whale. Or maybe she was. She was nuts. Anything for attention, hey Carrie. Unlike Carrie Bradshaw, the killer whale is a mastermind, capable of getting its own way and capable of teamwork. 2 killer whales in particular have made a name for themselves along this coastline. Their names are Port and Starboard. The pair are so named for their distinctive collapsed dorsal fins, which collapse to the left and right, respectively. They are among the pantheon of great famous orcas, alongside Kaiko the Stolen and Tilikum the Maligned. And now it seems that Port and Starboard, though living free from the glass of a SeaWorld tank, are not free from having their names tarnished. And now for an impromptu quiz. I hate to pit two powerful animals against each other, but I'm going to do it anyway. Can you answer great white shark or orca? Question 1. Which animal has more teeth? Any ideas? Shark or orca? You've got a 50% chance of getting it right. There's no harm in having a little guess. The answer is the great white shark, which has up to 300 triangular teeth, which are constantly being replaced. The orca has about 40 to 50 conical, non-replaceable teeth. So the next time you're standing in a queue at a supermarket, you should turn to the stranger next to you to quiz them on that and see if they know the answer. Be sure to shame them if they get it wrong. Question 2. Which animal has been recorded diving the deepest? Great white shark or the orca? The great white shark or the orca? Well, the orca record goes to an individual observed diving to a depth of 1,087 metres. Great white sharks have been recorded at depths of 1,200 metres. Another win for the great white. And question 3. Which of these animals is warm-blooded and gives birth to live young? The great white shark, perhaps? Could it be the orca? Who knows? Well, I know, after extensive research. And I'll be honest, that was a trick question. Yes, would you believe that description applies to both animals? I'm sorry for the trick. That was very naughty. A slap on the wrist for me. I've been out here for ages now, floating around, and still no sign. So, I'm going to gently make my way into the coast to meet my interviewee. Her name is Lacey Williams. Oh dear, it looks like the chum may have worked after all. There it goes again, behind me. Let me say my prayers and make my confessions real quick. Hi God, it's me, Nature Disturbed. I guess you already knew that. I haven't got in touch before, but I just wanted to let you know that I frickin' love you. Excuse my language. You the best. I know I've said before that you destroying Sodom and Gomorrah and killing all life on Earth via the Great Flood was a little cruel and uncalled for, but I retract those thoughts. They were totally normal and proportionate responses. And did I think it was unfair that you turned that lady into a pillar of salt for no good reason? I surely did, but now that I think about it, I bet she deserved it. I'm fully Team God. And as for my confessions, well, I'll confess. I secretly like Katy Perry. Anyway, I think I'm about to be eaten by a shark. Please let me into heaven. I'll do anything. Even foot stuff. Oh, it's a seal. I think it has rabies. If not, then there's something else very wrong with it. Not quite the unhinged jaws of a great white shark, but still terrifying. So on that note, I'm going to continue to paddle into shore. That's a concern. The water is full of chum and seals, and yet no sharks. Things must be worse than I'd imagined. As I was saying, I'm on my way to meet Lacey Williams, head field specialist at Oceans Research in South Africa. Great white carcasses have been washing up on the beach, and I can't think of anyone better to speak to about why that might be happening, because Lacey herself has led the necropsy, or animal autopsy, of one of these fallen giants. I'm just approaching the shore now, and I think I might be able to make her out in the distance. I'll just make a quick last-ditch attempt to charm over a great white shark. Come, little white sharks, I'll take thee away into a land of enchantment. Come, little white sharks, I'll... This isn't working, but it did make Lacey turn and start to walk away. Wait, come back! I promise I'll stop singing. Oh, Lacey, hi. I've just been paddleboarding around trying to entice a great white, and I didn't see one. I didn't have any luck. So washed up here on Mossel Bay to say hello and pick your brain a little bit. Thanks for meeting me.
Thanks for coming and stopping by. Despite being a historic hotspot for white sharks, it might actually be harder than you think to have one come up. They are pretty curious creatures, and they have been known to investigate paddleboarders or kayakers. But you also can have a white shark that if it's not interested, you're not going to see it, even with bait, even with chum. And we're in an interesting era of white sharks in South Africa, a pretty critical juncture about whether or not we're going to be able to protect them and conserve them for generations to come.
Yeah. It's a story that's both heartbreaking and intriguing, and it's one that you have first-hand experience with as someone who performed necropsy on one of the great whites. So, could you
Hmm.
please take us back to the moment when you were called to examine the shark and what that was like for you?
Sure. I will say that I do have firsthand experience, but I have to articulate that I'm very much another component and piece in this puzzle. I feel like I've learned and have witnessed from a lot of giants prior to me. So it was a pretty big moment for me to be asked to co-lead the necropsy because these are scientists that I'd watched and grown up and kind of learned from moving into the field. The baton was passed off on that day. I think purely logistically to start. Um, but I'll walk you through kind of the series of events and how it unfolded because it happened actually over the course of a few days. And we get word that two orcas, they are now very famous for being shark hunters, Port and Starboard, were sighted in Mossel Bay. And this was not their first sighting in Mossel Bay. This was in 2023. The first documented kill on footage by them was in May of 2022. It's always a big deal when they're around. And a dear mentor of mine, and a kind of a legend in photography in white shark world, Chris Fallows and his wife Monique, they taught me that you don't find orcas, they find you. So whenever they're around, you got to capitalize on getting whatever data you can get. There were diving operators that were able to get on their boat and get out there. I had some staff and students who were able to set up spots on land to try to get any information and observations that they could. And it turns out, the people that got on the boat, they actually watched one of the orcas complete the predation, take in and kill a shark in front of them. But there were some suspicions that maybe there was evidence of a kill that had already happened when the boat arrived on the scene. And my students who were on land, actually, we were able to confirm with the timestamps from their photos that in fact a second predation had occurred before the boat arrived on scene. It just wasn't fully witnessed in detail up close. So they recorded the predation. They followed port and starboard as long as they could. And then the next day is when one of the white shark carcasses washed up on shore. And my students were there. We were on the way back from Cape Town. So the staff and the students and all the different groups that were there were able to take the shark off the beach and transport it to an area in the harbor where we were going to perform the necropsy or animal autopsy, if you will, the next day. And my boss and the director of our organization, Dr. Enrico Gennari, the company's Oceans Research Institute, he's based in Cape Town. I'm based in Mossel Bay. And Dr. Allison Towner, she's the white shark researcher out of Gansbaai, had been one of the main researchers leading the necropsies and performing the necropsies on the white sharks since the very first carcasses started washing up in 2017. But she wasn't able to come to Mossel Bay, and we weren't able to get the shark to her. So another representative from Marine Dynamics, which is a cage diving company. This man, Ralph Watson, he actually used to work for Oceans. He'd been involved in prior necropsies for white sharks and cow sharks that had been predated on by orcas. He was able to come through, and Enrico called me and said, "Do you want to lead the necropsy? Ralph will be there with you, but it'll be the two of you running the show." And I said, "Sure. I've never done a necropsy on a white shark. What do I need to do?" They sent me all the data sheets. Allison Towner was fantastic. She called me. She wanted to know if I had any questions. She was really rooting me on as another woman in shark science and in STEM and rooting for my success, which I really appreciated quite a bit. And so the next day we we got there and we performed the necropsy, and it's a lot of measurements, a lot of measurements before you even go into the shark. But think of it like a CSI forensics. You want to take pictures of everything as best you can. So even before the shark gets moved off the beach, take the length, take pictures of everything as it washed up, and then make sure you also have, you can use calipers if there's any significant markings on the white shark's body. So bite marks, teeth rake marks from orcas, stretch marks from pulling it apart. Take any of those measurements, just like you see on crime TV shows, essentially. Before you go inside, and then you look at for anything, you take tissue samples, you'll look for anything abnormal, because it's not often that you get to open up a vulnerable and protected species, right? So make sure that it didn't die in vain. Get as much data as you possibly can. That's what we did. And I was very nervous because there were a lot of people watching. Thankfully, Ralph was there. We worked so well. Teamwork makes the dream work is my favorite phrase of all time. And we worked in tandem very, very well. All of the people, the students and research groups and intern groups that were there, everybody was engaged and paying attention, but I honestly couldn't even tell you how many people were there. I was so in the zone. A tree could have fallen next to me. I would have had no idea, because it was I still struggle to fully describe the day. It was so fascinating and awesome to be able to have that opportunity on a predated white shark that we know had been killed by Port and Starboard, to add data to this really hot button issue in South Africa. And it was also really emotional because I've loved sharks since I was 6, and here is a dead great white shark right in front of you. And it's dead for tough reasons. We're struggling with white sharks throughout the country. So it was both amazing and heart-wrenching. It has this combination of feelings all at the same time, and it's very heightened emotions for everybody involved. The researchers, it's a great scientific opportunity. The cage diving operators, it's really difficult because that probably is indicative of no white sharks for a little bit, which we can talk about why. And if they don't go out, that has implications for their livelihoods. So all of these big emotions. But I think a couple of them that really stand out about that day were the fact that every time I looked up, there was a different group of people watching and listening and observing and wanting to help. It was a very teamwork oriented day, which is really great. We don't always have that mindset in science and in shark science, and that was really beautiful to be a part of. I thought it was also fascinating when we opened the shark's stomach. We found a baby seal skull, a small seal skull in there in the spinal cord, but there was fishing line wrapped around it inside the shark's stomach. So whether or not the seal had died by white shark or died by entanglement and been predated by a white shark, we'll never know. But that was a, striking testament to our plastic pollution in the ocean. And then the other moment that I just kind of had this out of body experience, what would little Lacey think, was when I was cutting the jaws of the great white shark out of its head. And you grow up as a shark lover seeing trophy hunters collecting jaws. And that's kind of a marker of a shark that's been unnecessarily killed, right? They save the jaws. And you have to take them out for the necropsy. So they go to the Department of Fisheries, Forestry, and the Environment. So they don't end up on the black market. People will, take those prized pieces. And I just thought, never in my life did I think I would be cutting the jaws of a great white shark out of it. And here we were in one of the most incredible scientific and professional days of my life. And it meant so much to me. I got that shark's dorsal fin tattooed on me as a
Oh,
reminder of
cool.
everything that day symbolized for science, for sharks, for little Lacey, for the whole complexity of that day and the bigger narrative that it's a part of.
It's one of the biological mysteries of our time. And the fact that you were able to dissect a shark in front of all of those people, I can't pee if there are other people near me. I can't imagine the stress. So, how long were you performing the necropsy for, and what were the things that you saw that told you that this was not just you know, a shark dying from old age, for example?
Yeah. Well, the necropsy, we actually did it apparently in one of the fastest times. We weren't going for that, but apparently it was one of the fastest times. And I want to say 4.5 to 6 hours, somewhere in there. It takes a while. You would not believe how long those measurements take. And that was fast for us. I think it was 5 to 6, somewhere in there is where I'm going to settle. And there are some key characteristics where you're able to determine that it is a orca predation. Our first clue was the witnessing of a predatory event in the area and signs of a predation the day before or 2 days before. So that was the first clue. And then the white sharks had subsequently disappeared from Mossel Bay from the cage diving boat and our research boat sightings. And on the shark itself, you can actually see teeth marks from the orcas on the shark skin. You can see those on the pectoral fins. Well, that's one characteristic, and stretch marks on the shark skin. And then the pelvic girdle, so that's kind of the pectoral fins. Think of them as shark arms. If you don't know what pectoral fins are, they're the fins on the side. They essentially, the orcas can bite onto those and rip the shark open. So there's, yep, ripped open on the pelvic girdle. Think the chest. So on the bottom of the shark, between those pectoral fins and down. And what they do is then they suck out the liver. So the liver was missing, and this is very obvious because it is a huge organ in the white sharks. It can be up to a third of its body weight. Very, very fatty, very energy rich. If you're going to take one organ for energy, the orcas know how to get bang for their buck. So those are the kind of pretty characteristic signals is that tear in that pelvic girdle. We've got the teeth marks, the stretch marks, and the missing liver. And then I believe we also took swabs of those areas. We didn't process the genetic samples, but this had been done in previous carcasses that had washed up and were able, I think their most recent paper I read, they did this in Australia, but they were able to see that it was orca DNA and left in some of those tissues. Whether or not that happened and with the shark I necropsied, I don't actually know, but samples were taken. The missing liver and those teeth marks and that, I guess, method of consumption are very now established characteristic of orca predation on sharks, not just great whites. They've been known to predate on the cow sharks, which are a member of the Hexantiforms, one of the only places in the world where you can see some of these sharks that have more than 5 gills. There's a couple species in this order, but one of the places that you can see them kind of towards the surface of the water rather than in your deep, deep depths is South Africa. You can also see them in New Zealand and California, but they have been predated on by Port and Starboard as well by other shark predating orcas. And it's a similar method, if you will.
What was the length of the shark that you were?
3.8 meters, 3.8
Okay.
meter female.
So that's, I mean, that's not the biggest great white, but that's still a huge animal.
Believe it or not, for a female, she might not have even been fully sexually mature. It is still a huge animal. It takes a lot of people to take them off the beach. You don't know how old a shark is just by looking at it. You can gauge the size class or the age class based on the relative size. Again, look at humans. We've got a whole variety of shapes and sizes at similar ages. So the same thing applies across the animal kingdom. But you can tell in size classes when it's a juvenile. Nobody's ever seen a great white shark give birth. So the exact size at birth is still to be determined, but around 1.5 meters-ish is the estimate. And then males and females will reach sexual maturity way later. Females might be about 4 to 4.5 meters, or 4.5, maybe even 5, and males will be 3.5, 4-ish meters. And the way that you can tell a male shark has reached sexual maturity is if his claspers, which are the male sex organ, think like 2 penises, sharks have 2, if they're calcified, so if they're hardened, that's a sign of sexual maturity in sharks for males. Females do not have claspers. They have an opening called the cloaca. So the absence of claspers means female, presence of claspers means male. When she reaches sexual maturity, you probably either need to open her up, which would be traditional studies of learning about reproductive biology, would be lethal methods. Recent advances in technology and methodology is amazing. We can do ultrasounds on sharks. Comes with its own logistical complications, but it is possible. It has been done. And then there's still some further advances you can learn from blood draws from blood plasma, more information about a female's gestation cycle, where she is in that. But we're probably still in the early days. So you get your rough estimate, but I don't think that female would have been sexually mature necessarily or
No.
on the cusp. Yeah. Big shark, and yet not even popping out babies.
No. I have the image now of a great white shark giving birth, and it's really striking.
You would be the first. I would love to see it, but it's never been witnessed as far as
Yeah.
we know.
Wow. So even though probably a juvenile, she's a big girl. So the orcas that were responsible must
Mhm.
clearly be, I mean, they're orcas, but extremely powerful
They're much bigger
predators.
than a white shark.
Yeah.
Yeah, your
So,
max white sharks might be north of 6 meters, but your orcas will be 9. They're much, much bigger. Hmm. Very
okay.
capable.
Yeah. So there's no possibility of putting up a fight, really.
I wouldn't say zero, but maybe if it was one-on-one, but the likelihood of success for a shark, if the orca has decided to go for it, is much smaller. And what was interesting was, I believe it was this instance where they actually watched just starboard or just port, one of the orcas, the predation that was witnessed by the people on the boat. One orca wasn't involved. So it doesn't actually necessarily even require two necessarily. And there's some other, like a genetically different orca type specializes in hunting sharks. And so this, I don't know the backstory of all of the genes of Port and Starboard. I just know they're brothers. And they might have genes that are reflective of a species or subspecies or ecotype that can specialize in hunting elasmobranchs, so your sharks, skates, and rays. So yeah, it's not even a big proper white shark, unless that shark can get down deep real quick and into deeper waters, deeper and stay down longer than the orcas can breathe. It doesn't look good. They're highly successful, intelligent predators. They're extraordinary in the animal kingdom. I like to think if we had to compete with them on land, we'd be in a lot of trouble if we had to compete with orcas,
I
for
think
sure.
so. And they are working together. So what does that involve? Do we have an idea of how they're
They're doing it
cooperating?
a little bit. I don't know if there's been documented footage, to my knowledge. There hasn't, of the actual take and opening of the shark. The first recorded footage of it was drone footage off of Hartenbosch and Mossel Bay in May of 2022. And so that's the best picture that we have, where you see orcas kind of come up with the shark and then kind of go down out of some viz. The idea that we have is they'll grab onto the pectoral fins and they might, if the orcas are working together, they might grab in opposite directions and then rip the
So
shark
it's like
open.
I'm imagining like a Christmas cracker type thing.
Yeah, yeah, or the rack. That's kind of the image that popped into my head. Yeah.
Oh
And it's
yeah.
very possible with an animal that's, you know, double the size of a white shark. And these animals don't have hands. They don't use cutlery like we do. They've
No.
got their mouths, and that's it. And if a big proper orca is eating, in South Africa, we've had dolphin hunters, and their intelligence and their precision, they can even skin a dolphin with some of their teeth, is what I was told. Yeah, so it's pretty possible to open a shark, even a white shark that has massive amounts of muscle. It's very possible for an orca to do that.
You can do what you want if you're a killer whale.
Yeah, except stay underwater probably longer than, I think their max is 12, 15 minutes, something like that. But yeah, they're hardy.
And it's described as culture, isn't it? So they're just very cultured animals, really.
Very super socially complex. We're really beginning to unravel that. And it's not long ago when we were going and taking wild cetaceans, not just orcas, but dolphins from their pods and putting them into captivity. And we all now know from COVID, none of us like quarantine. It is not nice. And we've been putting animals that are highly migratory, that live in the open sea, in tiny pools and socially isolating them for sometimes their whole lives. And then we've learned more. So thankfully, steps have been taken, but we've learned so much more about, oh my gosh, these animals are intelligent. Intelligence is not unique to Homo sapiens. How do you even define intelligence in the animal kingdom? And what does that look like? We are not the pinnacle, I think, by any means. There is not a singular point that nature is going towards. And orcas are certainly, I think, just as intellectually complex, socially complex as humans. It just might look different because they live in the ocean, and sound is an incredible sensory system that's super important for them in ways that it is not for us, or ways that aren't, it's not the same magnitude for humans. So they do have culture, which is really cool. Like, I don't know if you
Hmm.
heard about the trends of them wearing hats, like salmon hats.
I did hear about that. Please explain
And
that
that's come
though.
back in vogue. She
Really?
will.
I didn't see them at the Met Gala. I guess
Yeah.
it's not dandy, but what's going on there?
Yeah. I don't think they really know. My understanding is the first time they were wondering why they were doing it. And the other idea it might just be for fun, and then it stopped, and then it has. I think there were reports of it starting again, whether or not it was in the same pod. I won't say I'm as clued up on orca culture as I am on white shark dynamics, but I remember seeing that and thinking, what the heck? But I don't know if dead fish would really make the cut at the Met Gala after a few days.
I mean, it sounds like it's pretty difficult to stay on top
Mm.
of orca culture, even for an orca.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, wow, they're smart. And then in Antarctica, I think they wash seals from little floats of ice, don't they?
That is gnarly stuff. I mean, the coordination that it takes to
Yeah.
swim at an iceberg so that your dorsal fins create a wave that breaks on the iceberg, and because of that dip in the wave, rocks it to knock the seal off into a waiting orca. It's amazing. It's amazing. The poor
So
seals.
poor seals, yeah. Poor anyone who's in the ocean who's not an orca. So the great whites have cottoned on to the threat now that's in the South African waters and they don't come anymore? Or is it just the case that they were there and now they're all dead?
So this is where the picture gets blurry and where the PR teams, I think, from science and conservation and sharks and orcas alike need a little work because it's really easy and convenient to have a sexy villain, which the orcas are. But it's not so simple. Nature rarely ever is so simple. When you find absolutes in nature, have an alarm bell tinkle in your head because that's not normal. So in nature, predator-prey dynamics are everywhere. That's kind of my specialty is predator-prey behavioral ecology. And what can happen, not just with animals, but also plants will do this too, is when a species is killed or predated upon, it can release a necromone, which is, think the prefix for necropsy, necrophilia, death. So it's called the death scent, like a death hormone. And that can signal to any other conspecifics, so animals of the same species in the area, get out of here. Danger, danger, danger. Plants can actually do that if, there's toxins or if they're getting plucked or if there's a beetle or something. So it's not just animals, plants are involved in this signaling as well. So when orcas come through and they kill a white shark, that body is going to release a necromone. That is going to be impossible, as far as I'm concerned, to figure out where that scent is going, how far it's spread, how long it's staying in the same area, especially because not every carcass washes up. If you remember this orca or the shark that I necropsied, there were two that were killed, only one washed out. And sharks are negatively buoyant, so they will sink rather than float. So if the ocean conditions allow for that shark to get pushed up, we'll find it. If they don't, we won't. Where that carcass stays and its impact on the environment with that necromone, who's to say? So that's where one factor comes into play where the white sharks disappear in the area is because of that necromone, if there's definitely a confirmed kill. It's also extremely possible that they are wising up to an anti-predatory behavioral response, right? There's animals that are getting killed by a predator. I'm a highly mobile predator. It's going to be in my best interest to get out of here. And there is tagging data that shows when Port and Starboard, I believe it's a Towner et al. 2022 paper. And that was one of the first papers really coming out documenting this interaction, and this was focused in Hansby. But there were tagged individuals that shortly after Port and Starboard were seen in the area. And I think other orcas as well, not just those two. The sharks moved. Within a few days, they were hundreds of kilometers away. Some into Mossel Bay, some up in PE further east. So there's also is for sure a behavioral reaction to the presence and or predation success of orcas. The exact magnitude of that and the duration is very difficult, and how long these white sharks have vacated these global hotspots has varied a lot as the story started unfolding. Where the complication comes into play and where it's not so simple is that orcas hunting white sharks is actually not unique to South Africa. This isn't the first time it's ever happened in the world, in South Africa, or literally in the world. And there are orcas that hunt other shark species. My first thresher shark I ever saw was in May of 2022 that was being predated on by a pod of 5 orcas, none of them port and starboard. So this is not a novel behavior. It's not a novel predator-prey interaction. What is unique is the dramatic impact that we're seeing this have on the white shark populations in these global hotspots, in False Bay, in Hans Bay. Mossel Bay was a bit later, but we are seeing it now, not to the same permanence. But there are not white sharks in False Bay really anymore in the presence that they were since 2018. And that was the global epicenter for those beautiful shots of white sharks naturally hunting seals breaching out of the water. That was where that became famous and was discovered. The grounds for that. Hans Bay, a couple, like a 2.5 hour drive further east, considered the global epicenter in terms of numbers of white sharks in the world. In these areas, there are seal colonies, same as in Mossel Bay, but there are other prey species to supplement their diet because a lot of, especially in Mossel Bay, we don't always have the mature adults. We might have subadults. And other shark species and other fish species are going to make up a more significant part of their diet than mammalian prey. As a great white shark grows up and gets bigger, that proportion of mammalian prey increases to become more and more important in their diet. But it is not the overwhelming majority. And seals are not easy prey either. It might seem like that, but they can hold their own. And so you have to have other food sources to keep these white sharks in these areas, in these bays. They had documented seasonality when they were going for the seals, but if they're in those bays and other times of year, what else are they going for? And so why the seal population isn't going anywhere? That food source hasn't changed. So what is causing these sharks not just to leave temporarily and come back, which we started to see them leave and come back, but the period of absence has increased and increased to the point that you don't really see white sharks in False Bay or Hans Bay at all anymore. And it's increased a lot more in Mossel Bay, where we're seeing it not just from days to weeks, but now in the orders of months. We did recently have white sharks. I think it was up to almost 2 weeks ago, and they have not been seen in the cage diving operator going out in the last 10 days-ish. They haven't gone out every day, but now we are at the beginning of a new period of absence in Mossel Bay. How long that is going to be, that's anybody's guess. And so that's where the complicating picture comes into play. Well, what else could be going on here? I'm going to give you one guess as to who you think the other culprit might be. What species?
For the disappearance of the great white sharks. Oh no. Is it
Which
us?
species? Yep. So there's been some interesting science looking at these other factors that are potential factors of mortality for great whites. Humans, here we go. Let's enter the picture. If you are new into the conservation world, if you are new into the ocean world, or if you are advanced, you will come across the fact that overexploitation of our natural resources is one of the biggest, if not the biggest threat to our natural resources. Overfishing, overexploitation is a serious problem for many species throughout the world. Climate change, I would say, just as big of an impact, and they compound each other. So looking at the white sharks in South Africa, where does this come into play? And there's two big prongs here. We got to go all the way back to 1991 when great white sharks were protected in South Africa. And this was the first country in the world to do so, which is amazing. And the first kind of numbers and population assessments of the South African population showed that the numbers actually might be slowly increasing once the protections started. But then we had demersal shark longlining permits issued in the early 2000s. And demersal shark longlining is a type of fishing technique. It has also been used in research, but when we're talking commercial industrial scales, it's causes a huge amount of mortality of target and non-target animals. Non-target animals being called bycatch, if you've heard that term before. Anything, you might be a tuna fishery, anything else that you catch that's not your tuna species is bycatch. And over 70% of commercial fisheries is often bycatch. And not a lot of it gets released alive. You also have illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing. So you have a lot of uncertainty in fishing catch reports and how many animals are dying that are not supposed to be. The demersal shark longliners are commercial vessels that were permitted. They were legally allowed to catch and kill soupfin and smoothhound sharks, which are ground shark species. And they are a massive prey species for white sharks. Big, big predatory sharks. Mustellus is the smoothhound name. Mustellus, the genus. You'll see those as commercial shark species in other areas of the world as well. Super popular for fish and chips. So the sharks that are being caught and killed, these soupfins and smoothhounds in South Africa, are actually being exported to Australia for fish and chips. Most Australians don't even know they're eating sharks. It gets mislabeled as, flake, for example, or whitefish. You're actually eating shark. And these species had been overexploited since the early 2000s to unsustainable levels. They are now endangered and critically endangered according to the IUCN. And we started to see now this knock-on effect of when you take out one of the most important prey sources for your white sharks, that's going to have a serious impact on the white shark's population and its ability to survive and reproduce. If you're not that healthy, you might not be able to reproduce as many young or at all. And so we start to see that have an impact, and some statistical modeling from papers showed in 2011, 2012 or so is actually when we started seeing the white shark populations decline in their sightings in False Bay and in Gansbaai. And Port and Starboard, these orcas were not seen. They were seen once in 2012, not seen regularly at all again until the end of 2016, 2017. And 2017 is when the carcasses started washing up. So you're starting to see these white shark population numbers go down because we're overharvesting their prey. It's kind of a hidden effect. The other prong, we go even further back in the 90s, think an artifact of Jaws, and go to the other side of South Africa, the eastern side, KwaZulu-Natal, where you have the Sharks Board and the Bather Protection Program. And I like to put protection in quotes because it's kind of an artifact from Jaws. And when we didn't know better, when you think, okay, let me put a barrier up, let me put nets in the water, and that will protect our beach users and our water users from getting bit by sharks. Most people don't know that those nets in the water are not a barrier. Animals can swim under them or around them. Most people don't know most animals are caught on the inside of the nets. And a lot of animals that are not sharks are caught and killed. They just pretty much kill everything. They're not checked with the regularity they're supposed to. The size of the nets have been reduced where they now also use drum lines to try to target sharks rather than kill other wildlife. A drum line is also another type of fishing method. Think like a weighted hook attached to a float at the surface. But still, a lot of animals are being killed. And the numbers of sharks on average that are publicly posted for the KZN Bather Protection website has hovered around 28. Now, we've got our overharvesting of their prey. We've got the Bather Protection Program. These are sources of mortality for the white sharks. One probably directly because they're probably catching and killing great white sharks. We actually know they are from a court case that happened in December, and a whistleblower came out as an observer on these programs back in 2011, but they're not supposed to be. They're not legally allowed to. And you have all of the illegal recreational fishing, any bycatch that happens. That's not even factored into these numbers, and all of the illegal recreational fishing of white sharks. So my master's thesis, we actually caught somebody illegally catching and trying to land a white shark in 2019. So all of that is going into the white shark population as stressors. There was a paper that looked at the life history of great white sharks. How long does it take them to grow and reproduce and probably maintain their population? What kind of numbers would we need of population growth and mortality that would lead to either a growing or reducing population? And they found that based on what we know about kind of that starting population number in South Africa and about their reproductive cycle, it would take mortality in the tens of great white sharks to cause the population to go down. But the number of the sharks killed by the Bather Protection Program is 28 on average, higher or lower. So that stressor alone would be enough to cause the great white shark population of South Africa to go down, not including the demersal shark longliners, not including the illegal fishing, not including the bycatch, and not including what I call the accelerant to an already burning flame, the orca pressure. Let's throw some gasoline right on a fire. So this is where all of a sudden it's a big mess. And what we do about it becomes much more complicated. It's really easy just to blame the orcas rather than having to take a look at our methods of overexploitation and having to untangle that mess, which every country around the world is still grappling with, no matter what the species. So I wish I could give you a short, easy answer, but in fact, it's a much more complicated picture.
To me, it sounds like these orcas are displaying a really interesting, exciting behavior that it indicates how smart they are. And it's something that in an alternate universe we could be really happy to see. But because of the situation that we've put the oceans in, it's not playing out that way. And not only that, but, and this is news to me, but they're being scapegoated, Port and Starboard.
Right? And like at the end of the day, they're natural, right? It's a natural predation event. It's wildlife going for wildlife. As a scientist and professionally and as a conservationist, exactly as you said, what they're doing is incredible. It's so exciting to see them. It's amazing what we're watching. And as a shark fan, as a shark gal, it's hard. It's really hard because you're watching your favorite animal get eaten by a predator. Boo. Naturalist is okay with it. That is how nature works. That is how we have actually stronger and healthier populations, both predator and prey alike. But as you say, yeah, when we start bringing in those wrinkles and then we start scapegoating an animal, that can have serious implications because then there's other people that are going to call for the killing of Port and Starboard, kill the orcas. They're ruining the industry. But why did we see those two show up on the scene in particular? Why there's so many other questions and so many other complicating factors that can go into it. Um, and one theory is, well, are we seeing more interactions with not just port and starboard, but other orcas because they need to find alternative prey sources because we've overexploited their prey sources in the high seas and other hunting areas. So now we've got increased competition with them. Their numbers aren't necessarily going up. We just might have actually had reduced resources where we're competing. And I personally don't think that game management and conservation and management and population stability techniques are slightly different, but you can't just kill an animal because you don't like what it's doing to another animal, especially when the reason that that animal that's being killed might be in trouble because we've killed too many in the first place. We can't keep using kill the animal, kill the animal, kill the animal as a reaction or a solution in this day and age with how much we know about our natural environment and how much we know about how many animals we've killed. We know we've exploited terrestrial and marine species alike. There's got to be a better way than just blaming anything else that's simple. We have to know it's more complex than that. Nature is complex, so we've got to adapt with it, I think.
I think so. What kind of effect is the disappearance of great whites having on coastlines around South Africa?
There's a bunch of different levels to it. So there's the ecological impact, and False Bay has been a great area for new research. There's a paper that came out this year too, looking at that. One of the first papers I was ever involved in from 2017 also addressed it, where something that was really neat was the cow sharks started showing up in areas that they weren't before. And they are a predator, but they will be eaten by the white sharks. So this is when you go back to niche partitioning in ecology. If a spot is vacated, there's got to be other species, or there will be other species, hopefully, that can take its place. So we're starting to see these ecosystem shifts in False Bay. The cow sharks were showing up in areas that they probably were avoiding because the white sharks used to be there. In Gansbaai, they saw huge increases in bronze whaler sharks in areas where they also would have been predated on by white sharks. We started to see bronze whaler sharks show up instead. So it's a different predator in the area, but it's going to have different influence on the surrounding environment. So we are in 2025. It's 8 years later, but science is slow. So 8 years might seem like a long time, 8 or 9 years, but we're still only kind of beginning to see what these changes are, study them, write about them, publish them. It's kind of unfolding in real time from an ecological front. One thing that's brand new on the scene in the last year, which has some interesting theories, which I don't think are unfounded and definitely worth investigating, is the prevalence of rabies in seals in South Africa. It was in 1978 where there was one record of rabies in a seal in Norway, nowhere else in the world ever again until last year. And they've done some retroactive sampling. They found that the earliest samples that tested positive for rabies in the Cape fur seals, Arctocephalus pusillus, came from 2021. So they've been in the seal population for a while. Sea Search is a great organization in Cape Town that's leading a lot of the research in this. They do a lot of amazing marine mammal research, including on the orcas. So there's really no experts. Everybody's uncovering this in real time. But one theory about why we're starting to see more seals with aggressive rabies symptoms presenting and getting closer to humans is, well, potentially there's not as many sharks in the waters anymore that were picking off those seals before they could even get to us. There's a phase of rabies where they can be kind of dopey and unaware, and sharks are going to prioritize taking prey with the least amount of effort. Those are going to be easy prey. So are we seeing a knock-on effect because the white sharks and that predation pressure is now missing or significantly missing and significantly reduced on the seal population, that we're seeing this grow in an unchecked way with a link that we didn't even know existed before? Who's to say? But I don't think that comes out of thin air. I think there would be something to that. And what else does it mean for the seal populations in general? And what would that mean for the seal's prey based on the seal populations? All these questions kind of ripple out. And then on the economic and the social front, there's a lot of industries that are significantly impacted by the disappearance of the white sharks, but most notably and obviously is your cage diving industry. I myself spent time on a cage diving boat in False Bay in the last 2 seasons of white sharks in False Bay in 2017 and 2018. And if you don't book a trip, the trip doesn't go out, crew doesn't necessarily get paid. And unfortunately, in what we see here in Mossel Bay as well, there's a cage diving vessel. As soon as news comes out that orcas have come through or a white shark has disappeared, or even for a few days in a row where there's no white shark seen around the boat, bookings drop and plummet. And that hurts businesses, but it's not just businesses, there's people behind them. The crew, that's their livelihood, that's their income, that's their food. The businesses where people fly to South Africa to see sharks. I moved here for sharks. My entire career actually could be attributed to South Africa's great white sharks, if we really think about it, is destabilized. People aren't necessarily going to come for white sharks. They're a huge, huge, huge economic draw through tourism. But all of the businesses that benefit, besides the eco-tours that take you to see the sharks, are the accommodation, is the food, any of the other activities that you're going to do while you're here. And so you have these untold ripple effects socially and economically there as well, which are significant. Like, you have no white sharks show up for 6 months and you get the odd trip out here and there and you have no idea when they're going to come back. That's a really seriously struggling business and people who need food on the table. Where are they going to get it?
I'm not South African, and I know that you aren't either, but
Mhm.
it also strikes me as being part of the South African identity, and that's
Absolutely.
at risk.
For sure. South Africa's such a fantastic, I'm not South African, but goodness gracious, I fell in love with this country, land and sea. And it was the white sharks back in 2001, the very first documentary of the breaching great white sharks of False Bay that made me say, I want to be a marine biologist, and I've never looked back. And it is a unique hub in the world with being at the convergence of two different oceans, wildly different ecosystems. There's so many species here that you only find here in Southern Africa or up into, Namibia, Mozambique. And white sharks are a critical, pivotal point in maintaining the health and stability of these ecosystems. Great white sharks as well, absolutely, but also the soup fins and the smoothhounds. And then landside, goodness, there's loads as well. It's home to some of the most critically endangered small plant biomes in the world. Cape Floral Kingdom is in this area. It's unique succulents and small plants you don't get anywhere else. And so the people come to South Africa. It's known as wine country, but people come for safari. People come for the sharks, to dive in Durban, to see the cage diving sharks, to dive with white sharks. You're absolutely spot on that from the natural side, they're a seriously significant part of South African identity and income.
Hmm. I actually have a question that's been in the back of my mind recently. Cage diving. I don't know the ethics about that. So while I have you, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Pros and cons. Not every cage diving company is created equal.
Hmm.
It really matters how you handle the bait. I don't think cage diving is inherently bad. I think it's incredibly important because of the data that we've been able to get from it, and the conservation aims because of it are absolutely great. But if you have an operator that's handling the bait and chumming and not adhering to permit regulations and trying to just get the sharks all spicy and pull them into the cage so people can have like Jaws moments, no, don't do that. That can damage the sharks more than help them. But I think there are operators out there that are good.
Okay, that is really good to know. I suppose that's probably the case with a lot of wildlife stuff. Like you
Yeah,
have to, it's fine if you go with the right person,
definitely. Yeah,
do your
definitely.
research.
Mhm.
So what do you think the future looks like for great whites in South African waters and also for the surrounding biodiversity and tourism? Big question.
It's a big question. I'll do my best to have a helpful answer. But truthfully, I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous. I've said for years that I think we have all of the right ingredients. I think the future of white sharks and conservation in South Africa is a great example for similar themes and issues throughout the world. I think they're a great token case to highlight that we really need to address conservation and management in the marine realm. There are the desire for people, for stakeholders of the ocean is there. We did a paper a few years ago surveying stakeholders for sharks in South Africa from totally different swaths of life, conservationists, anglers, commercial fishermen, government. People care. And I love that about South Africa and the coastal communities I've met. They care about what's in their backyard. Um, but we don't always have the same ingredients in the right spot. And universally across, almost unanimously, but across the board, everybody was saying that we do not have sufficient on the ground management and enforcement of conservation legislation. South Africa actually on paper has one of the best management plans written out for sharks, not just sharks, but rays, skates, chimeras, their relatives. And on paper, that's great. They seem feasible. People seem to, want to do that. But translating paper to action is a huge sticking point. And you're going up against like, syndicate level black market fishing, truly. And I think that's not unique to South Africa. We see that same issue throughout the world. We've got to have better on the ground management where you actually are enforcing the rules. And that's where you get sticking points. And that's where we get the complicated dissecting between ecology and environment and society and economy. So I'm genuinely nervous because I think it's a big challenge. And I think we're at a very critical period of time where if we don't get our act together, not just for white sharks, but for the ocean, we're going to have some serious losses that we can't get back. For example, deep sea mining, that's a whole nother can of worms to open. But if that goes forward, that's permanent damage. That's beyond anybody that's currently alive on this planet and any children or grandchildren that will have their entire lifespans. Nobody's going to see benefits or recovery from that. And we really do need to start thinking about what our kids and what our grandkids and our great grandkids are going to see because we are not going to be alive for the amount of recovery that it's going to take. It takes too long for that. But I do genuinely think we have all the ingredients that we need. We've got people, we've got ingenuity, we've got invention, we've got manpower, we've got money. It's just not all in the same pot. And that is a huge challenge. I don't have an easy solution for. But if we don't have hope, then we might as well have just given in. And I always fall back on nature as resilient. She's got it. She knows what's up. We have to help her out, but she'll be okay. Whatever direction evolution takes, it's us that need to really get our act together to conserve and preserve. I think we can, but it's not later, it's a now. It's a now thing.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do it. It's not too small. Whether or not you think you're a scientist, there's so many different ways that everybody has a strength and that genuinely, I believe, can benefit the planet. You might not know how, but everybody has a part to play. I think everybody has a duty to do that. I think we are of nature. We are not separate from the environment. We cannot survive without it. So I think it is everybody's responsibility to do what they can to do right, what you can do right by the planet. Do something, do anything, even if you don't think it's enough, because that's better than nothing. And somebody who might not see themselves where they want to be You definitely can do it right by the planet. You can be a shark conservationist or scientist, even if you don't like art and don't want to do science. If you're an artist and love sharks, there's a place for you. If you're a singer and you love sharks, there's a place for you. If you're a talker like me and love sharks, there's a place for you. Or insert love, whatever here. Um, I think genuinely think a lot of people don't think that they can do what needs to be done, and I don't believe that. But I do believe everybody has a responsibility to do what they can to help the planet.
Mm. Yeah, well said. And honestly, just now, the mystery unfolded to me. I'm not surprised now, in retrospect, that it's our fault. But yeah,
But I
what
think it's a
other
great take.
ending was there going to be? I guess I feel like I need some alone time, to be honest, after such a heavy conversation. So I might float back out on my paddleboard and pray to get eaten. But probably
I
won't have
think
any
that's a
luck.
wonderful place. I hope you enjoy your alone time. There's no better place to do that than with Mama Ocean.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your questions. Best fishes.
Best fishes. Well, here I am, reunited with my tongs in the shelter of my kitchen sink. I didn't know what I was expecting to learn going into that conversation, but reflecting now, it seems like there was never going to be a different outcome. Despite the seemingly grim state of affairs, not all is lost, and I found Lacey very inspiring. So thank you, Lacey, for sharing your incredible insights and your message of hope. Thanks for listening. Thank you to Damon Macmillan for the music. I'll finish with a poem, yes, another one, in addition to the two-liner I delivered at the start of the episode, you lucky devils. But before I do, I will trail off as a continuation of Lacey's train of thought. If you're a dog food taster and you love sharks, there's a place for you. If you're an arsonist and you love sharks, there's a place for you. If you're an experimental acupuncturist and you love sharks, there's a place for you. If you're a town crier and you love sharks, there's a place for you. If you're a Sagittarius and you love... This poem is cheerfully called Already Dead. The sharks are disappearing from the depths of Mossel Bay, two orcas commandeering Port and Starboard, here to stay. Brothers bound by culture and equal in their might, Port's distinctive dorsal fin collapses left and Starboard's to the right. Imagine now the last great white, the last for miles around, a lonely giant, an ancient fish, highly sensitive to sound and electromagnetism, and sight from dead-set eyes. With intelligence their holding stare each black pupil belies. Her perfect body, so finely tuned, looks for something she can seize, but her search for prey is halted fast by a feeling of unease. There's something in the water. Her senses are acute. She senses through the water something tails her in pursuit. She knows she's not the fiercest creature living in these seas, and she starts to dive as she always does in instances like these. For killer whales have to breathe, she thinks, so I'll move down from the air. But the threat which then engulfs her, for that she could not prepare. Surrounded by a net and brought up to the surface, she's designated bycatch, so her capture holds no purpose. No use for her, an accident. She won't leave someone fed. But there's no use in returning her, for she's already dead.